How do I explain to my husband that him screaming at video games is not okay? I am 27 years old, and my husband is 30. We've been together for almost a decade, married for 2.5 years. Looking back on our journey together, it's clear we've had our fair share of highs and lows. At the beginning, our love felt invincible. We were young and full of dreams, willing to overcome any challenge that life threw our way. But over time, those rose-colored glasses started to fade, and the realities of a long-term relationship began to reveal themselves. Right now, we're stuck in what feels like the deepest slump of our relationship yet. A few months ago, we decided it was time to expand our family and start trying for children. It wasn't a decision we took lightly. We pored over articles and books, had late-night conversations about our hopes and fears, and even underwent genetic and fertility tests to ensure that we were both physically prepared. I thought we were being proactive, mature, and responsible, checking all the boxes to make sure we were truly ready. But as the days turned into weeks, something began to shift within me. A small, nagging voice started to creep into my thoughts, whispering doubts I didn't want to acknowledge. It wasn't that I didn't want children. On the contrary, I've always dreamed of becoming a mother. It was that I realized, with a gut-wrenching clarity, that we were not ready, especially my husband. There were traits, habits, and behaviors he needed to address before I could feel comfortable bringing a child into our lives. One of the biggest issues was his lack of emotional awareness and control. My husband has always had one of the biggest hearts I've ever known. He's the kind of person who would give the shirt off his back to someone in need, who shows kindness to strangers, and who has an infectious laugh that lights up any room. But alongside that big heart is a darker side, a ruthless streak that can surface in moments of frustration or stress. It's like flipping a switch, and suddenly the warmth I love so much is replaced by a cold, sharp edge. The moment I snapped out of it, as I've come to call it, was during one of his gaming sessions. My husband loves video games, and he's deeply passionate about them. I've always tried to support his hobbies, even when I didn't fully understand them. But his version of passion is loud, deafening, even. Whether he's winning or losing, he screams at the top of his lungs. Sometimes it's celebratory, and other times it's pure rage. Either way, it's unnerving. Early in our relationship, his gaming tantrums didn't bother me as much. Maybe I chalked it up to youthful energy or an outlet for stress. But over time, they became harder to ignore. The volume, the intensity, the way it shook the walls of our home, it all began to wear on me. He used to yell vulgar and politically incorrect terms during his sessions, words that made my stomach churn and my cheeks flush with embarrassment. I had to draw a hard line and tell him that such language was unacceptable. To his credit, he improved. He stopped saying those words, but the screaming never subsided. I know that gaming culture can be intense, and I've read countless articles about how some players see trash talk or emotional outbursts as part of the experience. But to me, it's more than that. It's a reflection of how he handles his emotions, and it's not a reflection I want to pass down to our children. I don't want my kids to grow up thinking that yelling at the top of your lungs, whether out of anger, dissatisfaction, or even joy, is an appropriate way to express yourself. There have been other incidents too, moments when his frustration boiled over into physical outbursts. He's thrown controllers, slammed his phone against the desk, and even tossed random objects within arm's reach. Thankfully, he's moved away from that behavior over the years, but the memory of it still lingers in my mind like a ghost, reminding me of how easily his emotions can spiral out of control. And then there's the screaming. It's not just loud, it's relentless. To paint a clearer picture, we live in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our home is modest, and we've converted the garage into his office and gaming room. Even with the doors shut, I can hear him from nearly every corner of our property. Whether I'm in the front yard tending to the garden, in the back patio trying to relax, or walking to the mailbox across the street, his voice cuts through the air like a knife. I've caught our neighbors glancing over with furrowed brows, their curiosity thinly veiling what I know is judgment. I can only imagine what they must think of us or him. I've tried to reason with myself. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just a quirk of his, something harmless that I've magnified in my mind. But deep down, I know that's not true. I've lived with this for years, and it's only gotten harder to tolerate. It's not just about me anymore. It's about the kind of environment we would create for our children, the example we would set, and the values we would instill. I find myself wondering how to approach this with him. How do I explain that his behavior, while perhaps normal in certain gaming circles, is anything but normal to me? How do I make him see that this isn't passion, it's a toxic habit that he needs to address? More importantly, how do I make him understand that I'm serious, that this isn't just a phase or a passing annoyance, but a fundamental issue that could shape the future of our relationship in our family? These thoughts weigh heavily on me, and as I sit here writing, I feel a mix of sadness, frustration, and uncertainty. I love my husband deeply, but love isn't always enough. Sometimes, it takes more than love to bridge the gap between who we are and who we need to become. For now, all I can do is hope that he's willing to take this journey with me and that we can find our way back to a place where our dreams for the future feel attainable once again. The question keeps echoing in my mind. How do I explain to him that his volume and aggressiveness are not okay? I've tried talking to him before, but the words never seem to land the way I hope. His defenses go up almost instantly, as though I'm attacking him personally rather than addressing his behavior. I want him to understand that this isn't about stripping away his passion or his enjoyment of gaming, it's about finding a healthier, more respectful way to express it. When he plays, it's like the world around him ceases to exist. The walls of his gaming room become his fortress, and in that space, the rules of normal human interaction don't seem to apply. It doesn't matter if it's late at night, if the neighbors are having a quiet evening on their porch, or if I'm trying to focus on something else in the house. The volume of his voice and the intensity of his words takes precedence over everything else. It's as though he believes his emotions are too big to be contained, so they spill out in ways that feel impossible to ignore. His game of choice, more often than not, is Call of Duty. I've lost count of the number of times I've heard him yelling into his headset, his voice ricocheting through the walls like a ricochet in the game itself. Are you serious? What the hell was that? Get wrecked. These phrases and words have become part of the soundtrack of our lives. And while Call of Duty might be his favorite, his reactions aren't exclusive to it. Whether it's a high-stakes shooter, a competitive sports game, or even something as seemingly innocuous as a strategy game, the yelling persists. I've wondered if his outbursts are rooted in something deeper. Does he struggle to regulate his emotions? Could there be an underlying issue, like ADHD, fueling his intensity? I've read about how ADHD can manifest in heightened emotional responses, impulsivity, and difficulty self-regulating. But when I broached the subject, he brushed it off. I'm just passionate, he said. I don't need a diagnosis for that. It was a dismissive response, but not an unexpected one. He's the kind of person who prides himself on being self-sufficient, someone who doesn't like the idea of needing help, especially not from a professional. On the other hand, I know I have ADHD. I've been diagnosed, and I've spent years working to understand how it affects me. Therapy has been a lifeline, helping me to navigate the challenges of living with ADHD while managing my severe anxiety and depression. I've learned that awareness is half the battle. Acknowledging the problem is the first step toward solving it. I only wish he could see the value in doing the same. But his emotional outbursts aren't limited to volume. They're also peppered with words that sting more than I think he realizes. It's not every time, and it's not as bad as it used to be, but I still remember the words he once used so carelessly. We're both white, so there's no reason for certain slurs to be part of his vocabulary, even in the heat of a gaming session. And as a bisexual woman, hearing him throw around terms that undermine who I am or who others are felt like a slap in the face. I told him, point blank, that this was unacceptable. I explained how much it hurt me to hear those words, even if they were said in jest or as part of trash talk. To his credit, he listened. He stopped using the worst of the words, and for that, I'm grateful. But the fact that it took such a direct confrontation to get through to him still lingers in my mind. Why didn't he see it as a problem on his own? Why did it take me laying down an ultimatum for him to change? These questions weigh heavily on me. They make me wonder about the values we would pass down to our children if we had them. I've always believed that actions speak louder than words, and the way he expresses himself in those moments, yelling, cursing, letting his emotions explode unchecked, sends a message that I can't ignore. If we can't address these issues now, how can we expect to set a positive example for our kids later? I don't want to be the kind of partner who nitpicks or micromanages. I've tried to be patient, to let him work through things at his own pace. But when it comes to this, my patience is wearing thin. I'm tired of feeling like the only one who sees the urgency in addressing these behaviors. I know he loves me, and I know he's capable of change. He's proven that before. But love alone isn't enough to solve this. It's going to take effort, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about how he deals with his emotions. I've read countless stories online, seeking advice from others who've faced similar struggles. Some people say to approach the conversation calmly, focusing on how the behavior makes me feel rather than accusing him outright. Others suggest giving him concrete examples of how his actions impact our lives. And while I've tried both approaches before, the results have been mixed. Sometimes he listens and makes an effort to change, but other times he brushes me off, dismissing my concerns as overreactions. What I need is for him to see that this isn't just about the volume of his voice or the words he uses, it's about the bigger picture. It's about the kind of partner he wants to be, the kind of father he wants to become, and the kind of legacy we want to build together. I need him to understand that his actions don't exist in a vacuum. They ripple out, affecting not just me but our home, our future, and the people around us. As I sit here, trying to put these thoughts into words, I can't help but feel a mix of hope and fear. Hope that he'll finally hear me, that he'll take these concerns seriously and commit to lasting change. And fear that he won't. Fear that I'll be forced to make a choice I never wanted to make, between staying in a relationship that no longer feels sustainable and walking away from someone I still love deeply. For now, all I can do is prepare for the conversation ahead. I'll choose my words carefully, approach him with as much kindness as I can muster, and hope that he's ready to meet me halfway. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about us, it's about the life we're trying to build together, and the foundation we need to make that life a reality. Do our values align? The question of whether our values align is one I've grappled with for years. If I'm being honest, the answer is most of the time, no. When we first started dating, we were young and full of hope, eager to build a life together. Back then, it was easy to brush off our differences. We were still figuring out who we were, let alone what we stood for. But as the years passed and life became more complicated, those differences became harder to ignore. We've had countless discussions about what we believe, what we want out of life, and how we want to raise a family. Those conversations often ended in compromises, some small, others monumental. But compromise only goes so far when the core values that shape your decisions are fundamentally different. This realization is one of the main reasons I've decided we should hold off on having kids. I refuse to repeat the mistakes of my past. My mother wanted children so badly that she ignored every red flag in her marriage. She stayed with my father for religious reasons, enduring years of unhappiness because she believed it was her duty to make it work. I can't blame her for her choices, but I also can't pretend they didn't affect me. Growing up in that environment taught me a lot about what I don't want for my own family. I don't want to bring children into the world just because I want them. I want to be prepared emotionally, mentally, and financially, and I want to raise them with someone who shares my vision for what parenting should look like. For me, parenting isn't just about providing food, shelter, and love. It's about teaching by example, creating a safe and supportive environment, and instilling values that will help them grow into kind, compassionate, and resilient people. I need a partner who not only agrees with those ideals but is willing to do the work it takes to live by them. And right now, I'm not sure if my husband is that person. How does he react when I bring this up? Talking to him about these things is always a gamble. Sometimes he listens with an open mind, willing to reflect on his behavior and make changes. Those moments give me hope that we can work through this together, that we can grow as individuals and as a couple. But other times, he becomes defensive, dismissing my concerns as overblown or overly critical. I've had to make it clear that I'm serious about these issues, even going so far as to tell him I'm ready to leave the relationship if things don't change. That was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I didn't want to threaten him or give him an ultimatum, but I felt like I had no choice. If he wasn't willing to address the problems I brought up, then what kind of future could we possibly have together? To his credit, he didn't brush me off completely. He's taken steps to work on some of his behaviors, but the progress feels inconsistent. I've also asked him to give me feedback so that I can work on myself. I want this to be a two-way street, where we're both holding each other accountable and supporting each other's growth. But it's hard not to feel like I'm the one carrying most of the emotional weight in these conversations. What do I need to work on? I'm not perfect, and I've never claimed to be. I have ADHD, severe anxiety, and bouts of depression that can make everyday life feel like a Herculean task. I've been in therapy for a few years now, trying to build routines, understand myself better, and become the best version of myself. But it's a work in progress, and I know that my struggles have impacted our relationship. One of my biggest challenges is managing the chaos in my own life. I'm messy both literally and figuratively. I forget chores, leave tasks unfinished, and often feel overwhelmed by the weight of everything I need to do. Cooking, for example, is something I should contribute to more, but it's a task my husband has largely taken over because I often forget or feel too anxious to plan meals. I know it's not fair to him, and I've been working on being more responsible and reliable. I'm learning to manage my time better, set reminders, and hold myself accountable for the things I say I'll do. It's not easy, but I'm trying because I know that sharing these responsibilities is part of being a good partner. Why was this not an issue before, but is now? The issues we're facing now didn't appear overnight. They've been there all along, simmering beneath the surface. In the early years of our relationship, it was easier to brush them aside. We were young, in love, and optimistic about the future. I believed that with enough time and patience, we could work through anything. And for a while, that seemed to be true. Over the years, I've brought up a lot of concerns, and to his credit, he's addressed many of them. He's stopped using certain words during gaming sessions that I found offensive. He's made an effort to curb his more explosive outbursts. But not all of the changes have stuck, and some behaviors like the screaming have only gotten worse since we got married. I've almost left him several times. Each time, the thought of walking away felt like a punch to the gut. But those moments of near breaking have also been turning points. They've forced us to have the tough conversations we'd been avoiding, to confront the things we needed to change. And for a while, it worked. He would make an effort, and I would feel hopeful again. But the cycle keeps repeating itself. The changes don't last, or new issues arise, and I find myself back in the same place wondering if this is the life I want to live. I hate giving ultimatums. They feel manipulative and unfair, a last resort born out of desperation. I want to believe that we can work through our problems without me having to threaten to leave. But the truth is, I struggle with confrontation. By the time I've built up the courage to bring something up, I'm already at my breaking point. And that's not fair to either of us. I know I need to get better at addressing issues as they arise, rather than letting them fester. But I also need him to meet me halfway. I can't keep doing this alone, carrying the weight of our relationship on my shoulders, hoping he'll change without being fully committed to the process. This time, I'm prepared to leave if things don't change. Not just temporary fixes or half-hearted efforts, but real, lasting change. I want to believe in us. I want to believe that the love we share is strong enough to overcome these challenges. But I also know that love isn't enough on its own. It takes work, commitment, and a willingness to grow. And if he's not willing to do that, then I have to be strong enough to walk away for my sake, and for the future I want to build. Is therapy an option? When it comes to therapy, the road has been anything but smooth. I've asked him to go multiple times over the years, both on his own and as a couple, but he's resisted more often than not. It wasn't until I told him I was seriously considering leaving that he finally agreed. For 3 months, he attended sessions on his own, and I hoped, with every fiber of my being, that it would be the breakthrough we needed. But then, he stopped. He told me his therapist wasn't helping him, that the sessions felt pointless, and that they were too expensive to justify continuing. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to shake him and tell him that change doesn't happen overnight, that therapy is a process, not a quick fix. But another part of me felt defeated, like his decision to quit was just another reminder of how difficult this journey was going to be. I've been in therapy myself for a couple of years now, and it's been a lifeline for me. It's taught me to face my own demons, to build routines, and to understand the patterns in my behavior that hold me back. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. I scheduled an appointment for the two of us to go together through my benefits, specifically mentioning anger management as one of the key issues we needed to address. The therapist we've been assigned has over 40 years of experience in the field, and while we haven't had our first session yet, I'm cautiously optimistic. This feels like our last chance to make this work, and I'm clinging to the hope that it will. What does he can be pretty ruthless mean? Of all the challenges we face, this one cuts the deepest. My husband has a ruthless streak, and while he doesn't mean to hurt me, his words sometimes leave scars that take time to heal. Two of the biggest issues we're addressing are name-calling and unintentional belittling. I've come to realize that much of this behavior stems from the example he was raised with. His stepfather is, without a doubt, one of the most toxic people I've ever met. The man doesn't need to raise a hand to hurt someone, his words do all the damage. He belittles my husband's mother, talks down to her, and treats her like she's beneath him. He thrives on making others feel small, using bullying and gaslighting as his weapons of choice. He'll turn everyone in the room into the butt of his jokes, elevating himself in the process, and then twist the narrative to make you feel like the problem for being upset. It's hard to watch. It's even harder to think about the impact that living with someone like that must have had on my husband. I know he's trying to be different. He doesn't want to repeat the cycle, and he's taken steps to address some of those qualities. That effort is part of the reason I've stayed as long as I have. I see the potential in him, the man he wants to be, and I want to believe that he can get there. But wanting to change and actually changing are two different things. And as much as I love him, I can't ignore the fact that his words sometimes cut me down in ways that feel all too familiar. I know he doesn't mean to hurt me, at least not intentionally, but that doesn't make the pain any less real. A crossroads. I've reached a point where I have to be honest with myself about what I want and what I'm willing to tolerate. I know his behavior is unacceptable, and I've made it clear to him that I'm fully prepared to walk away if this continues. It's not an empty threat or an ultimatum, it's a boundary I've set for myself. I refuse to sacrifice my well-being or my future for the sake of a relationship that doesn't meet my needs. The decision to wait on having kids was a turning point for me. It forced me to confront the hard truths about our relationship and to think critically about what kind of life I want to build. I don't believe that wanting kids is enough of a reason to have them. Bringing a child into the world is one of the biggest responsibilities a person can take on, and I want to be sure that I'm prepared for it in every way possible, emotionally, mentally, and financially. People always say, there's no right time to have kids, and maybe that's true. But I know, without a doubt, that right now is not the right time. There are too many unresolved issues, too many red flags, and too much work left to do before we can even think about taking that step. Moving forward. As I sit here reflecting on everything, I feel a mix of emotions. There's sadness for the love we've shared and the future I once envisioned for us. There's frustration for the years I've spent trying to fix things that often feel beyond my control. But there's also a glimmer of hope that therapy will help us find our way, that he'll rise to the occasion and prove that he's willing to do the work, not just for me but for himself. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll come out of this stronger, with a deeper understanding of each other and a renewed commitment to building a life together. Or maybe we'll realize that we've reached the end of our road, and that letting go is the only way forward. Either way, I know one thing for certain: I deserve a relationship that makes me feel safe, valued, and supported. And if this one can't give me that, then I'll find the strength to walk away and create the life I want on my own. For now, all I can do is take things one day at a time. I'll go to therapy, have the hard conversations, and give us every opportunity to grow. But I won't lose myself in the process. Because at the end of the day, I'm not just fighting for this relationship, I'm fighting for me.